Imagine returning home after a grueling day, your muscles aching and your mind clouded with fatigue, only to be greeted not by the wagging tail of a golden retriever or the indifferent glance of a house cat, but by a 40-pound apex predator waiting to wrap its massive paws around your neck. This isn't a scene from a fantasy novel. This is the daily reality of Elias Thorne, a man whose quiet life in the Alaskan wilderness was appended by a creature as white as the falling snow. This is the story of Frost, a rare white Canada Lynx, and the man who saved him. It is a story about the boundaries of the wild, the stubbornness of the human heart, and the incredible, patience-testing journey of teaching a wild cat how to ask for a hug without drawing blood. Elias Thorne was a man who preferred the company of trees to people. A retired wildland firefighter, he had spent decades jumping out of planes into burning forests. Now, in his 50s, he lived in a sturdy log cabin on the edge of the Denali wilderness, carving custom furniture and enjoying the silence. But that silence was shattered on a brutal Tuesday in mid-January. The temperature had dropped to 20 below zero. Elias was out on his snowshoes, checking the perimeter of his property after a heavy blizzard. The world was a monochrome of white and gray, the wind howling through the spruce trees like a wounded animal. But then he heard a sound that didn't belong to the wind. It was a high-pitched, desperate chittering, a sound of pure distress. Fighting through waist-deep drifts, Elias followed the noise to the base of a rocky outcrop. There, half buried in a drift, lay a female lynx. She was stiff, frozen, likely caught in a shifting snowslide days prior. Elias felt a pang of sorrow. Nature was indifferent, but it was always hard to witness. He was about to turn back when he saw movement. There, tucked against the cold flank of the mother, was a ball of white fluff. It was a kitten, perhaps 4 weeks old, shivering so violently it looked like a vibration in the air. Unlike the mottled gray and brown of a typical lynx, this kitten was stark white, a rare leucistic genetic anomaly. He was invisible against the snow, save for 2 terrified, sapphire blue eyes staring up at Elias. Elias knew the protocol. The Alaskan Wilderness Code was strict. Let nature take its course. Call the Department of Fish and Game. Do not interfere. But looking at the fading light in those blue eyes, Elias knew the kitten wouldn't survive the hour, let alone the time it would take for rangers to arrive. Not today, little one, Elias muttered, his voice cracking in the cold, cold air. He unzipped his heavy parka, scooped the freezing creature up, and tucked it against his flannel shirt, right over his heart. The first month was a blur of sleep deprivation and anxiety that would have broken a lesser man. Elias named the kitten Frost, a fitting name for a creature that looked like a spirit of the winter. He drove 3 hours through treacherous roads to reach Dr. Sarah Miller, a veterinarian in Fairbanks who had treated everything from sled dogs to stubborn moose. When Elias walked into her clinic with a bundle of blankets, she expected a hurt puppy. When she saw the white lynx kitten, she dropped her clipboard. "Elias," she said, her voice stern, "you know this is illegal without a permit. And you know this isn't a house cat. This is a Canada Lynx. It will grow up to be a killing machine." "He's starving, Sarah," Elias pleaded, his rugged face looking unusually vulnerable. "He weighs 16 ounces. Just help me get him stable. I'll figure out the rest." Sarah sighed, the sigh of a professional who knew she was enabling a bad idea, but couldn't let an animal suffer. She prescribed a high-protein formula, antibiotics for a respiratory infection, and gave Elias a crash course in wildcat physiology. "Do not treat him like a pet," she warned. "Minimize contact. Keep him wild." Elias tried. He really did. But Frost had other ideas. The minimal contact rule evaporated on the 3rd night when the kitten, screaming in his crate, refused to sleep unless he was curled into the crook of Elias's neck. As winter bled into spring, the cabin became a war zone. Frost was not a cat. He was a force of entropy. He didn't just scratch furniture. He dismantled it. He discovered that the pendulum of Elias's grandfather clock made a fantastic target, destroying a 100-year-old heirloom in seconds. He learned to open the refrigerator, liberating 3 pounds of raw venison and dragging it under the sofa to guard it with guttural growls that sounded too big for his small body. Elias walked around town looking like he had fought a blender. His hands were covered in scratches, his eyes bagged with exhaustion. When he went to the hardware store to buy plywood, to reinforce the cabinets Frost had learned to open, the owner, Old Man Henderson, chuckled. "Get a new puppy, Elias?" "Something like that," Elias grunted, buying a pair of heavy-duty welding gloves. By autumn, Frost was no longer a kitten. He was a magnificent, ghostly presence, weighing 30 pounds with paws the size of dinner plates. He had the classic lynx features, the black tufted ears, the ruff of fur around the face, the oversized hind legs, but his coat was a stunning snowy white. Elias had built a massive enclosure in the backyard, fully 2,500 square feet of chain link and timber, complete with climbing trees and a heated shelter. It was better than most zoos. But despite the enclosure, the bond between man and cat remained dangerously strong. Every evening at 5:30 p.m., when Elias finished his work in the shop and walked toward the enclosure, Frost would be waiting. And this is where the problem began. Frost didn't just want to be fed, he wanted to be held. He had retained the kitten-like desire to be close to his savior. When Elias entered the enclosure, Frost would launch himself from a platform, aiming for Elias's chest. The first few times this happened, it was a bloodbath. A lynx captures prey by grappling it with front claws and raking with the back legs. Frost was trying to hug, but his instinctual mechanics were designed for bringing down snowshoe hares. Elias recalled one particular evening in October. He walked in, and Frost, overcome with excitement, stood on his hind legs and wrapped his forelegs around Elias's waist. The claws, sharp as surgical scalpels, sank through Elias's denim shirt and into his skin. Elias shouted in pain, and Frost, startled, dug in deeper to hold on. Dr. Miller stitched Elias up the next day. "You're lucky he didn't hit an artery, Elias. He's showing affection, but he speaks a different language. You can't keep doing this." "I know," Elias said, wincing as the needle went in. "But I can't stop him from greeting me. It breaks his heart if I push him away. I need to teach him English." "You want to teach a lynx English?" "I want to teach him how to hug in human." Elias went to his workshop and dug out his old smoke-jumping gear, suit made of Kevlar and reinforced canvas, designed to withstand jagged branches and intense heat. He then took an old leather logging jacket and sewed thick, distinct patches of sheepskin onto the shoulders and back. He looked ridiculous, like a dystopian padded warrior, but he was ready. The training began. It was a slow, painful dance. Elias would enter the enclosure wearing his armor. Frost would rear up, eyes bright with excitement. "Gentle," Elias would say, his voice low and calm. "Gentle, Frost." When Frost jumped and extended his claws, they met the thick leather. Elias wouldn't flinch. Instead, he would take Frost's massive paws and physically manipulate them, retracting the toes, showing the cat that he could hold on by draping his legs rather than gripping with hooks. If Frost used claws, Elias would step back and turn away, the ultimate punishment. Frost would whine, a high-pitched trill of confusion. It took 4 months. 4 months of repetition, of patience, of Elias sweating inside 40 pounds of protective gear. But slowly, the penny dropped. Frost began to understand that the soft skin of the man was fragile. He learned that to get the closeness he craved, he had to suppress his wildest instincts. One evening in late winter, Elias took a risk. He went out in just a heavy flannel coat, no armor. He opened the gate. Frost chittered from his perch and bounded over. He stopped 2 feet from Elias, rose onto his powerful hind legs, and extended his front paws. He froze there, trembling slightly with the effort of control. Elias held his breath and opened his arms. Frost stepped forward. He laid his paws on Elias's shoulders, pads soft, claws completely sheathed. He leaned his weight against the man, burying his face in Elias's neck, and began to purr a sound like a diesel engine idling. Elias wrapped his arms around the white lynx, tears freezing on his eyelashes. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good boy, Ghost." The ritual became their secret. Every evening, the hug. A moment of pure connection between two species that had no business loving each other. But secrets in small towns are hard to keep. A delivery driver dropped off a package, saw the man in the backyard embracing a white monster, and took a photo with his phone. By the next morning, the picture was on Facebook. By the end of the week, the Anchorage Daily News had run a headline, "The Lynx Whisperer of Denali." Elias hated the attention, but he underestimated the consequences. 2 weeks later, a black SUV with the state seal emblazoned on the door rolled up his driveway. Officer James Reynolds of the Department of Fish and Game stepped out. He was a by-the-book man with a flat-brim hat and no sense of humor. He inspected the enclosure, checked the permits, which Elias had obtained, but they were for temporary rehabilitation, not permanent residency, and looked at Frost. "Mr. Thorne," Reynolds said, standing by his truck, "you have a Class 2 predator here. He's habituated to humans. He can never be released. He's a danger to the public." "He's never hurt anyone," Elias argued, his heart hammering against his ribs. "He's secure. I've built a fortress for him." "It doesn't matter," Reynolds said, though his voice softened slightly. "The law is the law. You can't keep a Canada Lynx as a pet, especially not an intact male. You have 30 days to find a licensed zoological facility or sanctuary that will take him." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The alternative was euthanasia. Elias spent the next 3 weeks in a hell of paperwork and phone calls. He called zoos in Seattle, sanctuaries in Colorado, rehabilitation centers in Minnesota. Everyone said the same thing. "We are full, or we don't take habituated males, or we can't accommodate his special needs." The clock was ticking. Frost, sensing Elias's distress, became clingier than ever. The evening hugs became desperate, Elias holding on to the thick white fur, as if he could anchor the cat to the earth by sheer will. With 4 days left, Dr. Sarah Miller called. "Elias," she said, sounding breathless, "I found a place. The Northern Lights Wildlife Center. It's a new facility about 4 hours south, near Talkeetna. They focus on education and conservation. The director, Marcus Vine, saw the article about you. He wants to meet you." The Northern Lights Wildlife Center was beautiful. Nestled in a valley, it had acres of natural habitat enclosures. Marcus Vine, a man with a gray beard and kind eyes, met Elias at the gate. "I've heard stories," Marcus said, "but I need to see it to believe it. We need an ambassador animal one that can show people that these predators are worth saving. But we can't have a wild animal that stresses out around people." Elias nodded. He went to the transport crate in the back of his truck. He opened the door. Frost stepped out, blinking in the sunlight. He looked at the strange trees, the strange people. His ears flattened. He looked ready to bolt. Then he saw Elias standing 10 feet away. The tension drained from the cat's body. Frost trotted over, ignored Marcus, and rose onto his hind legs. He spread his paws wide. Elias stepped in. The hug was perfect. Frost rested his chin on Elias's shoulder, closing his eyes. Marcus Vine watched, his mouth slightly open. He had worked with big cats for 40 years, cougars, bobcats, lynx. He had never seen a bond of absolute trust like this. "Okay," Marcus said quietly. "He stays. On one condition." Anything, Elias said. You come with him. We can't replicate that bond. If he's going to be our ambassador, he needs his person. We'll hire you. Part-time, full-time, whatever you want. You run the educational program. It was a difficult transition. Elias had to sell his cabin and move into a smaller place near the center. Frost had to adjust to the smells of other animals and the presence of strangers. But they made it work. 3 years later, the Lynx experience at the Northern Lights Wildlife Center is the most popular educational program in the state. 3 times a week, visitors gather in the small amphitheater outside Frost's massive new enclosure. Elias, now wearing the uniform of the center, steps out with a microphone. He tells the story of the starving kitten in the snow. He talks about the biology of the Canada Lynx, the threats to their habitat, and the importance of respecting wildlife. Wild animals are not pets, Elias tells the crowd, his voice serious. They are wild. They have instincts that can hurt you. What you are about to see is not a trick. It is a relationship built on 5 years of trust, respect, and a lot of patience. He puts down the microphone. He turns toward the rocky outcrop in the enclosure. Frost, he calls out. From the shadows, the white ghost emerges. He is fully grown now, a majestic creature moving with liquid grace. He spots Elias, and his pace quickens. The crowd holds its breath. Frost reaches Elias and rears up. He is nearly as tall as a man when he stretches. He opens those massive white paws. Elias opens his arms. They come together. The cat wraps his legs around the man, burying his face in the familiar crook of the neck. Elias closes his eyes, his hand gently patting the thick fur of the lynx's back. For a solid minute, they just stand there, man and beast, swaying slightly. There is usually not a dry eye in the audience. One summer evening, after the crowd had dispersed, a young boy approached Elias. He was holding his father's hand, looking up at Elias with wide eyes. Does he know you saved him? The boy asked. Elias looked at Frost, who was now lounging on a high branch, watching them with sleepy blue eyes. I used to think I saved him, Elias said, crouching down to be eye level with the boy. But the truth is, buddy, he saved me. I was alone in the woods, and I had forgotten how to connect with anything. He taught me that trust is something you have to earn every single day. Even the hugs? The boy asked. Especially the hugs, Elias smiled. He has knives on his hands, you know. But he chooses not to use them. That's what love is. Having the power to hurt someone, but choosing to be gentle instead. As the sun dipped below the Alaskan mountains, painting the sky in violet and gold, Elias walked back to the enclosure for one last check. Frost was waiting by the fence, purring a low rumble that vibrated in Elias's chest. It wasn't the life Elias had planned. He wasn't the solitary hermit anymore. He was a teacher, a guardian, and the best friend of a ghost. He reached through the mesh, and Frost pressed his wet nose against Elias's fingers. Good night, Frost, Elias whispered. The white lynx blinked slowly, a silent promise that he would be waiting, arms wide open, when the man came home tomorrow. Do you believe a wild animal like a lynx can truly feel affection, or is it just survival instinct? And would you have the courage to trust a predator with a hug? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If Frost's story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another amazing story. Thanks for reading, and see you next time.